Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my top 10 waiver wire pickups for week number 14 of the 2023 fantasy football season. It's time to prepare for the fantasy football playoffs right now. Maybe you got to win this week to get in. Maybe you need to win this week to get your bye week. So we're going to try to add some players today to help you do exactly that and ultimately win your 2023 fantasy football championship. If you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below, whether you are new to the channel or not. Please make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 14 waiver wire pickups for the 2023 fantasy football season. We begin with my number one waiver wire ad of the week, Keaton Mitchell, running back of the Baltimore Ravens, going up against the LA Rams this week at home in Baltimore. Mitchell is currently rostered in 30.7% of leagues on ESPN and 18.8% on NFL. Now, the Baltimore Ravens were on bye last week, so obviously we have to go back to week 12 to look at Mitchell's stats, but I also believe the fact that the Ravens were on bye last week is why Keaton Mitchell isn't rostered in 50+% of leagues. Because if the team's bye week was, for instance, week 7, week 8 earlier on in the season, and we saw what happened in week 12, right? We've seen how Mitchell really appears to be heavily more integrated into this offense, that if they played a game last week, I genuinely think that Keaton Mitchell might be owned in 60, maybe even 70% plus of leagues in ESPN, NFL, CBS Sleeper, right? Because Keaton Mitchell did really look good in week 12, and the snap share is heavily pushing his way. Week 12, he was the running back 26 in PPR, but that doesn't really tell the whole story of that game, which was against the Chargers on Sunday Night Football in LA. The Ravens win 20-10. In that game, Mitchell had 9 rushes for 64 yards, as well as 2 receptions on 2 targets for 25 yards. Keaton Mitchell is a guy that ever since we saw him burst onto the scene a couple of weeks ago, he was a guy that I kind of compared to Devin Achane of the Miami Dolphins. I said that, Keaton Mitchell's like great value, good value, Devin Achane. Devin Achane was obviously a guy not drafted in the first round by any means, but he was drafted. Keaton Mitchell was a undrafted free agent, but they both have incredible speed. They're the guys that, they make one move, they put you in a fucking spin cycle, and then bada bing, bada boom, they're in the end zone, right? These are guys that have game-breaking potential. One carry could go for 80 yards and a touchdown at any point in the game, and those are guys that if are available on the waiver wire and they start seeing more touches, like is the case for Keaton Mitchell, you need to be jumping all over it. Week 12, the Ravens running back snap counts went like this: Keaton Mitchell 46%, Justice Hill 28%, and Gus Bus Edwards 27%, which was a very new look at this offense. Normally we are seeing Keaton Mitchell kind of buried down with Justice Hill and then Gus Edwards being the guy getting a majority of snaps, but that was not the case in week 12. And I think coming out of the bye week, the game plan, the MO of this Ravens offense is going to be to get the ball more into the hands of Keaton Mitchell, because Keaton Mitchell is one of the best playmakers that they have, especially since Mark Andrews is now out. Mitchell outcarried Gus Edwards in week 12 in that game against the Chargers, as well as having the same amount of targets as Edwards and Justice Hill combined. To me, like I've been saying, to put a bow on this conversation, I do really believe that it's starting to feel like Keaton Mitchell's season. It feels like he is a strong grasp, firmly grasp it of this offense, and I think Keaton Mitchell has that league-winning upside. And if he's still available, you need to not just walk to the waiver wire, right? You need to full-on sprint there. At number 2, we got Ezekiel Elliott of the New England Patriots going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. 34% rostered on ESPN, 24.6% rostered on NFL. Now, Ramondre Stevenson suffered a sprained ankle on Sunday. The current report is that the team is unsure on how much time he will miss. Now, I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins, but I would be shocked if he played on Thursday, and he could miss further time after that. So at the very least, if you have Stevenson, you need to pick up Zeke because he's an instant fill-in this week, and he might be able to fill in, step in for your team for the next couple of weeks. Now, Ezekiel Elliott's a guy that earlier on in the season, when he started to see more carries than I would like as a Ramondre Stevenson truther, it was like, why in the fuck is this guy getting the carries? We saw Ezekiel Elliott last year as a Dallas Cowboy just running at snail's pace, right? Running like he's stuck in quicksand, right? Like you're playing Mario Kart Double Dash and you're on the map with the sand and you're driving and it tries to suck you into that hole. If you know, you know. That's what it felt like watching Ezekiel Elliott run the ball, right? He was running in slow motion. But this year, he's looked a lot better. And I'm not going to sit here and give him the Gawk Gawk 9000 special and tell you that the Zeke is back from all those years ago, early on in his career where he was one of the best running backs in the NFL. Of course, I am not going to tell you that. But I do think that Zeke has enough juice left in the tank to even on I almost said on a Pittsburgh Steelers offense, which sucks, on a New England Patriots offense that sucks donkey hog, I still do think that Zeke is good enough to be fine. He was the running back 13 last week in PPR prior to Monday Night Football. This video comes out prior to Monday Night Football, so I'm not going to just rub my crystal ball and make up something, right? Make up where these running backs are going to finish, Mixon and ETN. So running back 13 in PPR so far for Zeke. Week 13 against the Chargers, they lose 0-6. Disaster. They're clearly trying to tank or something. 17 rushes for 52 yards, 4 receptions on 5 targets for 40 yards, and a fumble. If Zeke sees 5 to 6 targets in this game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is going to be the lowest scoring game you've probably ever seen ever since that game where the Patriots played the Bills and it was like a windstorm and they were just handing the ball off a million times, right? This game might even be worse than that. We got Kissing Titties Mitchell Trubisky versus the Zappinator Bailey Zappi, but I think there is a nice part about this game, and that is that I think the Patriots are going to continue to give a lot of touches to Zeke. So without Ramondre Stevenson, Zeke is a guy that I would heavily consider starting this week, even if the Steelers defense is this, that, and the other thing, right? The Steelers defense is fine, right? They got spit roasted by Kyler, but they're still good. But I still think Ezekiel Elliott could have a huge game. This might seem crazy to say right now, again, with how bad the Patriots are, but there's a chance if Stevenson misses some serious time that Ezekiel Elliott's your running back to your flex on a championship roster. At number 3, we got Noah Brown of the Houston Texans going up against the New York Jumbo Jets in MetLife. Wide receiver of the Texans, obviously, 34.5% rostered on ESPN, 12.9% rostered on NFL. Now, with Tank Dell out for the season with a fibula injury, I fully expect Noah Brown to step up as the number 2 wide receiver on this team behind Nico, Cousin, Let's Go Bowling, Collins. Now, Dell did have his surgery today and is expected to make a full recovery for the start of the 2024 season. While obviously it sucks, it's terrible if you drafted Tank Dell or you picked him up, right? But at least it's good for next year, right? At least it seems like he's going to be good to go for the start of next season. Now, Noah Brown did miss a decent amount of time with a knee injury recently, and he did return last week in that game against the Broncos. The Houston Texans win 22-17, and Noah Brown has 2 targets for 0 receptions. Now, I know some people look at that, they'll hit the fucking Mayday button, wee woo, time to panic, but prior to that week, he had 2 straight weeks with 6 or more targets, and in both of those games, he had over 150 yards. I get the matchup against the Jets isn't the most ideal, but Noah Brown has that upside weekly to score 25 plus points, and if you can find that on the waiver wire, you definitely want to attack it. At number 4, we kind of have the opposite of Noah Brown, right? Noah Brown right now, as we're sitting here, kind of feels a little bit risky weekly, right? We saw just 2 targets last week for 0 receptions. I think there'll be a lot more consistency now with Tank Dell gone, but it wouldn't really shock me against the Jets, right? If Tank Dell got 6 targets, 4 receptions, and had like 30 yards, right? Now, he does have the upside to get over 150 yards, right? Because prior to last week, he did that in 2 straight weeks. He has the upside to score multiple touchdowns in any given game. He's in an offense with CJ Stroud, who looks exceptional in his rookie year, right? It's the exact opposite scenario in New England with Demario Douglas of the New England Patriots going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. This is Thursday Night Football. How luxurious. 33.4% rostered on ESPN, 14.2% rostered roster on NFL. And the way that Noah Brown is just the polar opposite of Demario Douglas is Demario Douglas feels like that nice, safe wide receiver, right? Wrap a condom over your team, super safe. Now, Demario Douglas, because Bailey Zappi and this offense are such a disgrace to this great country of the United States, right? I get that Douglas ain't going to go out there and score 25 plus points. But what he's going to do is basically every single week be a top 30, top 28 wide receiver. He probably won't crack the top 10, the top 12, but he's going to be very, very reliable. Now, Douglas was out last week with a concussion up against the Chargers, so we got to go back to week number 12 for his stats. Wide receiver 35 in week 12 in PPR. They lose that game to the Giants in MetLife 7-10. 6 receptions on 9 targets. Very nice, I like, for 49 yards, as well as having 4 straight weeks with 7 or more targets. Again, if you're looking for that fireworks, shout out to Jason Pierre-Paul, right? Shout out to Katy Perry. If you need that in your lineup, then maybe you don't want to add Demario Douglas. But if you feel like you need a safety net to throw into your lineup weekly, maybe a nice depth piece at the wide receiver position, then Demario Douglas is exactly that. At number 5, we move to Jayden Reed, wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers, going up against the New York Football Giants in MetLife on Monday Night Football. 42.6% rostered on ESPN, 49.8% rostered on NFL. Now, Christian Watson sadly suffered a hamstring injury last night on Sunday Night Football. Now the door is really wide open for Jayden Reed to see even more work in this offense. And this is a Packers offense that is just dealing out back shots weekly at this point, right? Against the Lions, they laid a pipe for that ass like they were a plumber. Against the Chiefs, against a defense that a lot of people have started to really turn around on, right? Give the gawk 9,000 special to. It seems like everyone's talking about the Chiefs defense too. Now, me included, right? The Chiefs defense is much improved from prior seasons, but you know, Jordan Love Me Tender, Love Me Sweet went crazy. Now, Reed was the wide receiver 44 last week in PPR versus the Chiefs. They win 27-19. Shout out the Packers, really helping out my Dolphins to potentially get the 1 seed in the AFC at the end of the season. 4 receptions on 5 targets for 16 yards. Now, he has had 4 straight weeks with 5 or more targets, and in 2 out of his last 3 games, he has had multiple carries, and the multiple carries are kind of like the whipped cream and the cherry on top of your milkshake, right? What you're coming there for is the nice milkshake, right? Strawberry's my favorite. Maybe you think that's a little weird. Some people just go vanilla, chocolate. You can go with whatever kind of fucking milkshake you like. But you know that a lot of people, myself included, like the nice cherry on top, like the nice whipped cream, right? And that's just the brownie points, the added extra points that Jayden Reed could potentially get. And without Christian Watson now, it does feel, at least to me, that I have to feel much more confident in Jayden Reed, because Christian Watson, prior to that injury, which sucked because initially I was like, oh, he's just, you know, kind of taking a knee to stay in bounds. They're wrapping the game up, you know, it's, ooh, look at this, the Packers are going to beat the fucking Chiefs, it's awesome. But no, he suffers a hamstring injury. Again, I said this earlier in the video, I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sin, so I won't pretend to tell you guys like, oh, he's going to miss this amount of time, right? Watson has dealt with hamstring injuries in the past. I hope he's okay. But at least for this week, you'd have to think that Christian Watson's gone, and that does really give Jayden Reed some added upside. Speaking of the Packers offense, we got the other wide receiver, Romeo Doubs. Romeo, eat a W. Wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers going up against the Giants in MetLife. 38.5% rostered on ESPN for Doubs, 32.1% on NFL. So if you can't get Reed, I think Doubs is a nice consolation prize. Wide receiver 29 last week in PPR. Again, they beat the Chiefs 27-19. No one saw that coming except for me, because I bet on the Packers money line, because everyone on TV, you always know when every single person on, you know, whatever channel the game's on, I forgot, maybe it's like NBC, everyone before the game, oh, I got the Chiefs, this to that, right? Everyone picked the Chiefs. They have like 10 different people predict the game. Everyone picked the Chiefs. That is normally when an upset is happening, when a team looks so obvious that they're going to win. The opponent, like the Packers, are cruising for a bruising, then they get fucking steamrolled. The Chiefs got absolutely butt-fucked in that one. 4 receptions on 5 targets for 72 yards for Mr. Doubs. With the emergence of Watson in this offense, like Reed was still fine, but it really felt like Doubs was starting to take a back seat in that offense, right? That his workload was being reduced. and that he wasn't going to be a guy that might get potentially 7 or 8 targets in a given game. But with Watson now out for the foreseeable future, Doubs should be back to seeing more work. And while I am a Jayden Reed guy, said in the offseason, I think Jayden Reed is better than Doubs. Early on the season, I was saying, hey, I think Jayden Reed's better than Doubs. That doesn't mean that Doubs is by any means some garbage can like Oscar the goddamn Grouch in there, right? So Romeo Doubs up against the G-Men. I think this could be a game where the Packers run up the score and Reed and Doubs both form an Eiffel Tower over that Giants defense. Moving next to player to add number 7 on the waiver wire, we got Tyjae Spears, running back of the Tennessee Titans, going up against the Miami Dolphins in Miami, also on Monday Night Football. So 2 games on Monday Night Football at the exact same time because that just makes perfect sense. Why not just start one at like 7? So at least, you can kind of flip back and forth during the games. Now, I got 2 TVs. I'm fortunate because you guys have helped my life out so much. I really do appreciate you guys. I can watch both games at once. But for most fans, they're not afforded that, right? You don't want to watch one game on your phone, one game on the TV. I get the games on paper suck donkey cock, so it is what it is. But why does the NFL do that? That doesn't really make too much sense. 32% roster on ESPN, 7.5% roster on NFL for Tyjae Spears. But before we talk about Tyjae Spears some more, as well as waiver wire ad 8, 9, and 10, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the best place to play NFL Pick'em in the whole entire universe, and Underdog has a great offer for you guys today. But first, I want to explain how the Underdog Pick'em works. So what are we talking about tonight? Monday Night Football, the Bengals at the Jaguars. So we have to pick a minimum of 2 players from at least 2 different teams. So we're going to take 1 Bengal and 1 Jacksonville Jaguar. First, we're going to go ahead and go with Evan McPherson, higher than 1.5 field goals made. I think the Bengals might be able to move the ball past the 50, and then McPherson will do his work from there. This isn't a Bengals offense with Jake Browning that I expect to be scoring a bunch, but I do think that Evan McPherson can get at least 2 field goals in this game. And then for the Jaguars, I want to go ahead and go with Calvin Ridley, higher than 56.5 receiving yards, with Jones now back on the team. Back with the team, Ridley's been balling a lot better, playing a lot better, and I think he replicates that this week against the Bengals. So if both of these hit, we'll get 3 times our entry fee. If you do 3 picks, it's 6 times, 4 picks is 10 times, and 5 picks is 20 times your entry fee. Obviously, all of the picks have to hit. Now, if you live in one of the states listed on your screen right now, and you are new to Underdog and use promo code Notorious or click on the link in the video description, you'll get a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. You deposit 100, they give an additional 150, additional 50, 25, additional 25. The minimum deposit on Underdog is $10. If you have a gambling problem, please make sure that you call 1-800-GAMBLER. Back on into things here. Tyjae Spears again going up against the Dolphins on Monday Night Football. 32% owned on ESPN, 7.5% owned on NFL. So head coach Mike Vrabel clarifies that Derrick Henry is actually not in the concussion protocol. With this game being on Monday night, it feels pretty plausible that Tractor Cedo Derrick Henry plays. If Henry was in the protocol, and I felt more confident that maybe he would be out, then Spears would be much higher up in the rankings. But feeling now like Derrick Henry is probably going to end up playing, or more likely than 50% chance that he plays, in my opinion. Now, again, I'm not a fucking doctor, so take this with a grain of salt. But the fact that he's not in the concussion protocol kind of tells me that he's more likely to play. Running back 14 last week for Spears in PPR. They lose to the Indianapolis Colts in overtime, 28-31. 16 rushes for 75 yards, 4 receptions on 6 targets for 13 yards. We've kind of talked about Tyjae Spears all season long as a guy that, hey, if the game plan gets out of the way, right? If the game script goes south, right? If the Titans are in a game like this week against the Dolphins, where the Dolphins go up, hey, it's halftime, it's 21-0. It's 17-0. Right? Then they have to throw more. Then obviously you can't feed the beast, Derrick Henry, and you have to start throwing Tyjae Spears out there to catch passes to block for Will Levis, the Mayo man. So this kind of game script is positive for Spears. But the thing is, now there isn't 6 teams on bye, there's just 2. So in a majority of leagues, even if this is a positive game script for Spears, with Henry in at least sucking up the touches early on, it still would appear that you'd want to stay away from Spears. Now, again, if Henry was to miss, then Spears is a guy that could easily rip off a top 12 game here, even up against the Finns defense. If Henry is in. Sure, if you're in a deeper league, you might need a desperation start. You can play Spears. Maybe your running back core is decimated like your toilet after you eat Taco Bell after drinking 30 fucking beers on Friday night. Sure. But what I will tell you is that if Henry is in, I mostly view him, again, unless you're in this deep league or your running back room's decimated, Spears is definitely just much more of a handcuff. At number 8, we got Antonio Gibson of the Washington Commanders, who are currently on bye this week. If you guys have enjoyed this far, make sure you guys hit that like button, whether you are new to the channel or not. Whether you are... Actually, if you are new to the channel, that's what I meant to say. Whether you are new to the channel or not, hit the like button. And if you are new, make sure you smash that subscribe button like it owes you some money. 44.7% rostered on ESPN for Antonio Gibson, 39.8% on NFL. Brian Robinson suffered a hamstring injury on Sunday against the Dolphins. And hamstring injuries are a bit of a fickle bitch, as I would say, right? They're an injury that could come back, come bite you in the hammy again, and this could mean that he misses multiple games. Now, maybe since they're on bye, by the time they got their next game, which I believe is against the Rams, maybe he'll be back, right? But if he isn't back, then we'll be seeing Gibson as well as Chris Rodriguez Jr. get touches in this backfield. So, while Antonio Gibson might be a Adam 1 week early, even if Brian Robinson is back, there are still arguments to be made to start Gibson in more positive matchups. Running back 17 last week in PPR. They lose to the Dolphins 15-45 in Washington. 10 rushes for 35 yards, 4 receptions on 5 targets for 37 yards, as well as having a fumble. But they didn't lose the fumble. It was recovered, so just a fumble for Gibson. Again, I'm not sitting here banging the drum aggressively for Antonio Gibson. But if Brian Robinson was to miss, with how Sam Howell does look to check down a lot, then I think Antonio Gibson has sneaky top 18-ish upside in any given matchup. Again, assuming Robinson is out. And again, a lot of the times making an assumption makes an ass out of you and me. So I'm not going to claim it's a guarantee, but it is definitely possible. At number 9, we got Gardner Minshew Mania, quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts, going up against the Cincinnati Bengals this week in Cincinnati. 10.5% roster on ESPN, 8.4% on NFL. Gardner was the quarterback 9 last week up against the Titans in Tennessee, winning 31-28 again in overtime. Probably one of the most exciting games of the week. And for being honest with you, I really thought that 49ers versus Eagles game was going to be real exciting, real back and forth affair, and it started off pretty fun, right? That was a game where it's like, ooh, look at this game of the week. You're watching early on. It's kind of close, right? And then in the third quarter is when Debo started just going crazy. Debo went nuclear in that game. Not 1, not 2, but 3 fucking touchdowns on your head top. Hilarious to watch, especially with how much of a douchebag Nick Sirianni is. It was nice to hear him shut up after that one. But again, I'm not like some Eagles hater by any means. But I just thought it was funny, right? It was a funny game. Like, if you're not an Eagles fan, objectively, that was hilarious to watch the 49ers just beat the ever-living shit out of the Eagles. Quarterback 9 last week for Minshew. 26 completions on 42 attempts for 312 yards and 2 touchdowns, 3 rushes for 2 yards. He does, I believe, have 1 rushing touchdown on the season. Gardner's not going to go out there like Kyler or like Lamar and run a crazy amount, but he's going to, if the lane is open, run. He's kind of like Baker, right? Not the most shifty quarterback ever, but if he thinks, hey, nothing's open, I can get the first down, the line's doing well for me, he's going to go try to run for it. Now, does that always end up in a first down? Fuck no, baby! But he is one of those guys that does give it a try, right? He gives it the good old college try. 2 solid weeks in a row for Minshew, like I said. Obviously, Minshew is far away from a must-start quarterback, and in reality, most of the time you add a quarterback off the waiver wire, you're not picking up fucking Patrick Mahomes, right? You're not picking up the second coming of any of these great quarterbacks in the NFL, right? Most of the time, the quarterback you pick up is just a serviceable start. But if you're looking to the waiver wire for a quarterback, that's what you get here with Minshew. I know the Bengals matchup obviously isn't a wet dream, but he should easily be at the very least a top 16 quarterback on the week. Final waiver wire add for week number 14 is Elijah Moore, wide receiver of the Cleveland Browns, going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars at home in Cleveland. 34.4% roster on ESPN, 15.4% on NFL. It does appear that DTR is still in the concussion protocol as we are speaking right now on Monday. If Cool Joe Flacco plays again, and with Amari Cooper suffering concussion on Sunday and not returning to the game, it is very plausible, shout out the Mythbusters, that Cooper's out this week. And if that is the case, we might see Elijah Moore get fed like Violet Beauregard in Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. Wide receiver 28 last week for Elijah Moore. Week 13 at the LA Rams, they lose 19-36. Cool Joe Flacco was cooking early on that game, though. 12 targets for Elijah Moore, 4 receptions for 83 yards. That marks now 2 straight weeks with 9 or more targets and 4 straight games with 7 or more targets. I've talked a lot about Elijah Moore in the offseason about how, hey, the New York Jumbo Jets, Zach Wilson, they did not give Elijah Moore a proper crack at things, right? Elijah Moore was held back by the Jets offense. Now, it's not like the Cleveland Browns have done him that much of a service, but if Joe Flacco's playing, I think he's getting 10 or more targets again. I really do. And even against the Jaguars defense that's pretty middle of the road, I think Elijah Moore could be a start in deeper leagues. Again, he's not going to be like some top 24 option in my rankings. He could definitely finish that high. Probably be ranked closer to like wide receiver 34, 36. But again, if you're stuck in a pickle, Elijah Moore is perfectly fine. Assuming Amari Cooper plays. Assuming, like I said, assuming makes a assumption out of you and me, made an ass out of me because I just said that wrong. Assuming that Cooper doesn't play, then Elijah Moore would be a start. So thank you guys all so much for watching. Did I say that correctly? If Amari Cooper doesn't play, then Elijah Moore ends up being a start. I just put myself in mental gymnastics there, but I love you guys all so much. The hamster wheel running in my brain, the hamster slowed down. It is what it is, but I do love you guys so much. I hope you did end up enjoying today's video. If you did, and you are new to the channel, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below. Whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. Does really help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do at NotoriousFantasy if you'd like access to my weekly rankings, as well as an answer to any of the questions you guys may have. Make sure you guys check out the Patreon. Link in the video description for $7.50 a month. Love you guys all so much. Again, hope you all have a great rest of your guys' day. Check out the defenses to stream video on your screen right now. Love you all. As always, good boy.